Welcome to the Make Your Brain Happy podcast, hosted by Veronique Cardone, MS, the podcast where you'll learn how to live your life to its fullest potential. This is for anyone who's interested in the science of the brain or wants to seize the power of positive thinking, enhanced mental performance, and a healthy lifestyle.
My guest is Isabella de la Houssaye. She's an endurance athlete. She's practicing mindfulness every day. She went from Louisiana to Princeton, and from being a lawyer to a banker to a business owner. And not that it defines her, but she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in January 2018. And today we are exploring how mindfulness and being in the moment can help her and you dealing with adversity, with disease, or just with stress. So thank you so much, Isabella, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question is always, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Myself. So I also have 5 children, which it's complicated.
Yes, it's impressive.
And, you know, in terms of the mindfulness, I'm an avid advocate for mindfulness today, and part of that advocacy stems from the fact that I lived a large number of years without being mindful, and I've learned through my own experience how beneficial it can be to every part of my life, from relationships to managing my own health and stress.
Mm-hmm. So you know, that is a burning question, but you are an endurance athlete, but you are always experiencing the outdoors. You are summiting the Aconcagua.
Right.
You are in Africa. You are in Asia. You have a love of nature. So what is nature for you?
So I feel most comfortable in the outdoors. I find that there's an energy to nature. I feel like I'm connected to the universe when I'm with nature and life itself, and the smells, the sights, the colors. It gives me energy. I draw energy from it, and that's been my whole life. Maybe that's growing up in Louisiana. I don't know, but it's
always been with you.
It has been, yes. But I've spent a lot of my time, you know, working in an office, so it's a little one extreme to the other.
Yes.
So I find that it enables me to do that part of my life, which I have to do at a desk. You know.
So, but how were you escaping the desk? How were you finding the time to get outdoors and to enjoy nature?
So early mornings, you know, some hours of the day, it's hard to call your own because you either have to be at work or you have to do things with children. Yeah. But early morning is mine, you know, those hours from 5 to 7 a.m., sometimes even earlier. And that's where I find my time. And then every chance, every vacation, every holiday, we try to be very outdoors and active.
Mm-hmm. You have instilled this in your children. They are, all of them, accomplished athletes as well. Is this, how did you embarked on adventures with them, or they wanted to go? How did that happen?
You know, I decided way back when I was out of law school, that I never wanted to sort of fall into a traditional suburban lifestyle. Like I love adventure, I love being active, and when I started having children, and you don't have a lot of time for yourself to go off on these adventures, so I would just take the children. Yeah. So I'd strap them on my back, or, you know, in one of these carriers, and just bring them along. And so they were used to being, you know, they crossed Mongolia on horseback, strapped to mules when they were very young, and, you know, that went from, you know, being carried to walking to then running, and I feel like I was sort of dragging them along for years, and now they're pulling me to be adventurous with them. So I feel like I passed the baton, and now I'm the follower, and they're the leaders, which is great.
It's interesting because I'm a mother too, and I realize how we influence our children with the way we live our life more than we know. And personally, I wish I would have done a few things differently when my children were younger. But back to you.
Well, one of the things, if I can just, is the actions speak louder than words is so true. And when you're trying to teach lessons to your children, you know, getting out there and experiencing it with them is really key. So even when my children took Taekwondo when they were young, I was in there doing my best. And it matters. It gives you time with them, and it's a learning experience for you as well.
Okay, so now, January 2018, you are diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and it has already metastasized, right, in many parts of your body. But you had some warning signs that you did not associate with cancer.
Right.
So tell us how all this happened. You know, how did you finally say something is wrong with me? What's going on?
Right. It's easy to, in retrospect, to sort of look back and see what, I was doing that wasn't healthy at the time, and the major culprit was stress and not getting enough sleep. And those are all things I've tried to correct since I've gotten sick. But leading up to my cancer, I was such a strong athlete and so strong physically that I was still able to function at a very high level. I had won an Ironman race. The fall I got sick. I mean, I was sick, and I still was competing. And so when I go to the doctors and say, look, I have a level 10 pain, in my back, they'd sort of say, yeah, well, you pulled a muscle, you'll get over it. Nobody was really thinking, oh, you have cancer, and nobody was thinking I had lung cancer because I was performing. And so it was a surprise for everybody, a good wake-up call for me.
So what has this diagnosis taught you?
A lot. It's weird to, part of the process of coming to terms with being sick is being at peace with it and sort of finding a gratefulness in the experience. And I can literally say I'm grateful to have had this experience and it's brought me closer to my body, closer to what it means to being healthy from a nutrition perspective, and certainly a sleep and stress perspective. And it's really taught me how precious life is and those experiences with people and around you. So it's actually made living much more intense and beautiful, actually.
So when diagnosed, you took the bull by the horns, and you are following a treatment and so forth. But you also embarked on a couple of trips with your children. Tell us what's the purpose of those trips. Like your most recent one was the Aconcagua in the Andes, right, with your daughter.
Yes, although I just got back from running a race in Mongolia with my son.
I'm sorry. Okay, I cannot follow with you.
Right. No, just taking you back to that moment when I was diagnosed, and it took about a month to determine what the treatment would be. And in that month, I really deteriorated physically very quickly. So I was losing strength in my legs. I had the cancer was in my spine, and very quickly losing my physicality. And that was frightening. And then you get this diagnosis, and you're just sad beyond words. What sort of that part of your life that you've lost. And so that's a big shock, and you don't know if the treatment will work. So you sort of have to come to terms with that and accept it, which is its own process. Mindfulness is very helpful. Yes. Sort of coming to terms as quickly as you can with the fact that feeling sorry for yourself really isn't going to help the situation, and then just moving forward with what you have. So I went through that process, and the drugs, thank goodness, have been helpful to me, and I was able to regain a lot of my physicality over the next few months. And so to strengthen that, I embarked on a series of walks and time in nature that I felt was very healing for me. to complement the treatments I was getting. And doing those with my children in circumstances where we were, offline, disconnected, so that we could really talk and communicate, and I could try to begin to pass on those words of wisdom. You want to leave with your children in ways that were more experiential than just the words. So yes, we did. My first was with one of my sons walking the Camino to Santiago in Spain, and just having 10 hours a day to walk with him for 21 days was a fabulous and beautiful experience.
Yeah, and no iPhone, no connections, just you, your son, and nature.
And it was the same. My daughter on Aconcagua, that was a 3-week, expedition. And again, there's no connectivity. You're in nature, and you're doing something that's difficult but possible. And it's a real lesson in staying in the moment and not being overwhelmed by the totality of the experience. So even if you, with the Camino, if you set out and you said, I'm going to cover 26 miles a day for 21 days, that feels very overwhelming. But if you just think, I'm going to take one step at a time, and all you do is focus on that step, it becomes totally doable. And with Aconcagua, it was the same. You think, I have to summit, 23,000 feet, and it's freezing, and I'm miserable, and if I feel this miserable today, I'll feel worse tomorrow. You just can't do that. You have to stay in the moment. It's sort of a lesson in mindfulness to be able to do that. And so that was a great sort of training ground for my daughter. And it's always, it's a work in progress for me as well.
But how did you teach her that? How do you teach that? Like, do you have a precise example, or in our prep, before the interview, we spoke about also helping your children understand when to stop or when to continue.
Yes.
Listening to your body signs.
Yes. I find that learning through the physical body, learning sort of mental lessons, it's very helpful to me. That is just the way I learn. Other people may learn differently, but I have sort of passed on to my children the way I learn. And I began to learn mindfulness through physical activity. For me, it was actually yoga that brought me to a better understanding of my body and my mind, which is interesting because I was 20 years an athlete before I started with yoga. Yoga came to me 7 years ago as a gift, and it has changed my life. But it was in that practice that I learned how to not use the strength
of your body.
I had, right, and rather, the expression effortless effort, how to do things with ease, and that's that's a process. Getting back to your question about teaching children what's uncomfortable and then what is pain or discomfort that is dangerous. Those are lessons that are taught a lot with endurance sports because they can be dangerous. If you get dehydrated, if your electrolytes are out of sorts, if you get altitude sickness, those are life-threatening issues. And learning to recognize, I'm tired, I'm cold, and I'm uncomfortable, and knowing what that is, and then knowing what, my blood pressure just dropped, I'm dizzy, I don't have a good cognitive sense right now. Those are very different things. A lot of people confuse them, and a lot of people shut down at the first sign of discomfort out of fear, because you think, again, I'm uncomfortable. It triggers a fear response, and mindfulness really helps you assess that fear. Is it a valid fear? Is it not? If it's not a valid fear, then it really shouldn't come into my decision making. But those are all, the better you know your body and your mind, and everybody's different, you make those decisions with more facility, more facilely.
But so I'm not an endurance athlete, but at one point I was prepping for a half marathon. So at one point I was like, I wanted to stop running
everything was aching.
Yeah.
And but I was like, you can do it, you can do it. So I was talking to myself.
Right.
And how do you dig into your mind to make the next step? How are you doing this?
So you said it. The words are "you can do it," and the power of positive thinking is immense. And I see that increasingly in my life across the board, whether it has to do with staying healthy, accomplishing things, accomplishing tasks. The very first step is to be positive about your ability to do it. I believe very strongly that I have the power within me to heal my body and to fight my cancer. And yes, I'm using the drugs. I'm not an idiot.
Yes.
I also believe that positive attitude helps tremendously. So the first step, and sometimes I'll do the same, I'll talk to myself in a race as if I were coaching. Sometimes I imagine I have a child next to me and I'm getting them through it. And I'm talking to myself in the same way that I would talk to my child. You can do this. Breathe. If you can breathe and take that next step, you got it. Just one step at a time. And there may be a point where you can't take that step, and you'll deal with that at that moment. But that is not something you worry about in the moment where you can breathe and you can take that.
Yeah, and let's not worry about some hypothetical event that could happen in the future.
Exactly.
But it's not there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of multi-day races that are actually nonstop, like 72 hours. I ran across Libya years ago and in the Sahara. And it's fascinating when you do something like that to see the cycles that your mind goes through. And when you're feeling bad and you have pain, and the assumption is always it's going to be worse.
Yes.
With time. That's actually not a true assumption necessarily. It cycles, and just to see, even in the cycle of a day, darkness comes, the middle of the night, just before dawn, that's when it's the hardest to keep going. And then the sun comes up and you're empowered to continue, and you move on. And that's mental. It's the tricks your mind plays on you. So anyway, the power of staying in the moment, not making assumptions about what the future may or may not hold, and staying positive.
But also you say that at one point, if you have to stop running, or if something is not working, that you have to have also this power to say, I accept it.
Yes.
I let it go. Do you have some examples where you use this? Especially, you've been living with cancer now for almost 1.5 years, and you're doing very well.
Yes.
And I'm so happy for you. But is there a moment where you say, I have to let it go? I think this is something also people have to learn to do in life.
I think what I would say to that is that you can't have an attachment to an outcome.
Okay.
So, and that involves, again, staying in the moment. So whether it's climbing a race, you can't be too attached. Like, the end goal is not necessarily the finish line. The end goal is to live to die another day. You don't want to kill yourself in the process. So whether it's climbing a mountain, finishing a race, it's enjoying the moment you're in and living in that moment, so that if you're too attached to the summit, too attached to the finish, and it becomes all about that, you're much more reluctant, or you're going to be disappointed if that doesn't happen. And that, you've had a wonderful experience. Why, say you get 9/10 of the way, appreciate that you got 9/10 of the way, and maybe you didn't get that last 10th. That's okay. Accept what you can do in that moment. The Four Agreements is a wonderful book, and one of the precepts is, your best is the best that you have in that moment, and that is not a fixed best. That varies, and it varies based on sleep and things that are out of your control, weather, other people. You just have to do the best with what you have in that moment and feel good about that. No judgment.
You've lectured at Columbia Law School recently about mindfulness.
Yes.
Mindfulness when you're facing adversity and so forth. Do you have like a couple of concrete examples that could help our viewers today if they're facing adversity, and not just a disease, but could be, stress because you need to find a new job, or financial stress?
So I will explain mindfulness as I understand it, and there are people bring to it their own understandings. For me, it's a tool. So it's not the end goal. It is a tool to then rewire your thinking, right? So understanding where your emotions, where your reactivity is coming from. First of all, appreciating your reactivity and your resistance. What are you resisting in life? What are you reacting to? Does it serve you? Asking yourselves these questions. For instance, when I got sick and the first reaction is intense sadness and debilitating sadness. Does that serve you? No. But you have to be mindful enough in that moment to ask that question and then take the next step of, okay, if it doesn't serve me, then why am I doing this? Resistance, why would I resist being sick? Resisting what is just wasted energy.
Yeah, totally.
So learning, though, to recognize your resistance. When I taught that class at Columbia, I had everyone start in a Warrior II position. And, in yoga, the assumption a lot of times is you move through positions. And I had them hold it for about 5 minutes. And you could see people, thinking, the voice in the head, what is she doing? Why am I standing here?
Yes.
This is supposed to be about mindfulness.
Yes.
Why am I holding a Warrior II position?
Yes.
I'm tired. That's resistance in your head. If you embrace that moment and breathe into it, it becomes a very pleasant, easy movement. If you fight it, you're going to feel fatigue, you're going to feel muscle strain, you're going to feel all that negative energy is going to make that an unpleasant experience. So that was just a little experiment with the kids to say, you see, learn to recognize those voices in your head that are holding you back. If you have, for kids, if you have multiple exams on the same day, you're not going to change it. Like, you can argue about it all you want. It is what it is. Just study. If you just put your mind to the task as opposed to resisting the task, it saves you a lot of energy and time. So those are the messages, and that's, when you're trying to be a mother, be a business owner or a lawyer, and you have a lot on your plate, any resistance takes energy away from what you're doing. Even, it's funny, things as simple as like a rainy day. You can resist it all you want. It's raining.
Yes.
Get your raincoat and go out. It's not gonna.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually part of the nature experience. Is a lot of people love nature so long as it really works in their favor.
Yes.
A beautiful sunny day is great, and then the rain comes and the thunder, and people are like, "Oh, it's raining."
But
it's nature.
Yeah, but that's what you were trying to teach your children, is that you have to learn to live uncomfortably.
Yes.
Not just...
Not everything's going to be, that's the expectation part of life. They say there's a wonderful equation. Reality or happiness equals reality minus expectations.
Yes.
And it is just so true.
Yes.
Nobody promised that life was going to be pain-free or happy all the time. I mean, and if you want to experience life, then you embrace it in all of its components, the good, the bad, the fun, the not so fun.
Well, we're getting very close to the end of the interview. You see how quickly it goes. And I wanted to ask you, because you are living with this diagnosis, with an outcome that is you have to face, which by the way, we all face death at the end of our life. So my last question is, how do you tap into your mindfulness to enjoy your life and go with the flow and say, que sera, sera, but what do you do?
I think the single best, easiest tip, and it's like a trick to changing your mindset, is continually making a gratefulness list, always trying to see the positive in any experience and be grateful for that. And sometimes it's really hard. It took me a few weeks when I got my diagnosis to be able to turn that around and be able to say, you know, I'm grateful for this, this, and this, and recognize everything that the diagnosis couldn't take away from me. You know, sure, some things change, people resist change, but appreciating the change and being grateful for the new path it takes you on, it just really is a helpful tool. And getting in the habit every day of making that list. When my kids are yelling and screaming, I'm grateful for them. You know?
Yes.
Just that can really change your lens, the lens through which you see things, and it makes a difference.
Well, thank you so much, Isabella. Do you have a last pearl of wisdom to share with our viewers today?
I will say one more thing about happiness and that lens. A day is a day, an experience is an experience, and whether we label it good or bad is within our control. It is a label and it is a word, and it is in your control to put the label that you want to have on it. So every day can be a great day. You just have to put that label on it.
Well, thank you so much, Isabella. I'm truly inspired, and I try to apply what we're talking about to my life, and I've really learned to become better at it. But I think it's you have to constantly work at it.
Yes.
Also. It's not like something you do 5 minutes.
It is a work
It is like a
progress.
way of life. But thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for the Make Your Brain Happy podcast. This episode was recorded by Veronique Cardone and produced by HG Media. If you enjoy our podcast, please share it with your friends. You can find our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you listen to podcasts.